Recording in progress. Recording in progress.
Good evening and welcome to the Zoom Trinity Chapel this All Souls Day. We welcome you to another in the series of conversations, the series which was started July 2020, where the Church of the Holy Trinity sought to bring our parishioners together. At that time, we were not able to meet face to face, but we used this medium to reach out to our parishioners. And as I said, we started in July 2020, and we've been going on a monthly basis ever since then, missing out Christmas and the New Year. So welcome again. I now invite Althea Murray Harding to lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who has drawn us, thy servants, together this evening to discuss the topic of suicide, which touches all of us in some form or fashion. Grant us wisdom, discipline, and devotion as we seek to understand, to guide, to comfort, and to encourage each other in an effort to help reduce and indeed eliminate this problem from our society. Dear God, we know that you are all-knowing, all-loving, and all-forgiving. And because of this, we ask that through this discussion this evening, you will provide us with a quick perception of the feelings and needs of others, so that we will become even more eager-hearted to help others who are in need. We give you thanks for our knowledgeable panelists this evening with their special gifts of wisdom and understanding, of counsel and of strength. And we pray that the words of their mouths and the meditation of their hearts will be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord our God. Amen.
Thank you, Althea. As I said, this is part of a series of conversations that we've been having since July last year. And by way of background, out of a session we'd have had earlier, part of the discussion we're told that we were not really aware of the number of suicides and attempted suicides in Barbados. And also, in keeping with this, we're told that the COVID-19 pandemic is contributing to additional strain on our mental health, the loss of jobs, the financial strains we are under, restrictions on our movement. And as the pandemic is expected to last for another few years, these challenges will continue. And one of the resulting outcomes is said to be an increase in the number of suicides and attempted suicides. And we are challenged to know, as members of the community, how can persons experiencing mental health challenges be identified and helped? How can persons contemplating suicide be helped? How many persons have been stopped from committing suicide? I will now age myself and say that back in the 1970s, there was this popular program on television. It's called MASH, and it reflected some of the things that happened with the American military. This would have been around the time of Vietnam. And we sang along to the lyrics and not really maybe understanding. But it's only in doing this research that I actually pulled the song because I remembered it. And part of what the song said was, suicide is painless. And the first verse it says, through early morning fog I see visions of the things to be. The pains that are withheld from me, I realize and I can see that suicide is painless. However, we all know that suicide is not painless. Death leaves survivors. Mental health issues are real. Tonight, we will explore some of these challenges with our panel. We look forward to your questions as we seek to be better informed as we discuss suicide. Me, you, and everybody. Our panel members tonight are Ms. Francisca Plummer, a psychotherapist and counselor, Ms. Jolene King, principal consultant of 246 King Consulting and a mental health advocate. Kathleen Rochford is a parishioner. And we have Ms. Deanne Sobers, the president of the Barbados Association of Palliative Care and Grief Counsel. Now, before we start, just want to speak to a couple of our housekeeping rules, as it were. Over time, the media has covered these sessions. So I am just asking that unless you are not fearful of the media, what you say tonight can end up in our local paper tomorrow or even on the blogs tonight. So that's just a warning and just a caution in terms of what has happened in the past. The media usually covers the session. And as usual, when it comes to the question time, there's the option to raise your hand. You know, that facility is offered in reactions, or you can post your question in the chat. We're now about to start, and I will introduce our panel. If you notice, I would have given the names in the order that they'll be presenting. So first, we have Miss Francisca Plummer. Over the past 20 years, Ms. Francisca Plummer has been fulfilling her lifelong vision of supporting individuals and couples, facilitating self-understanding, change and renewal through psychoeducation, therapeutic intervention, and mental health consultancy. She's accredited by the British Association of Counseling and Psychotherapy and is licensed to practice in St. Lucia. She holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from University College of London, a master's degree in psychotherapy and counseling from City University London, as well as a graduate certificate in advanced counseling from Lynchburg College. Ms. Plummer has experience in London and St. Lucia, working clinically across diverse populations, as well as in a variety of settings, including mental health, substance abuse, employee assistance, and college counseling. She works with persons who want to understand themselves better and improve their function, as well as persons presenting with mental health problems such as depression, suicide, and anxiety. Over the years, Ms. Plummer has also served as consultant to regional governments in areas of mental health and psychosocial programming and curriculum development. Welcome, Ms. Plummer.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My pleasure to be here this evening. Mr. Brown, should I go ahead?
Yes, sorry, go ahead. Yes, sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And again, it's really a difficult topic, I think, that we are going to talk about tonight. But I, of course, hope that we will be open to the discussion and really engage with all of the complex issues around suicide. It's a term that we use a lot. I'm not sure if everybody is, on the same page with what suicide really means and how it is that we need to approach someone who is considering suicide. When we think about suicide, we're looking at self-inflicted death. And that has to be with evidence that the person intended to die. Mr. Brown alluded to a suicide attempt in which somebody does an act which has a non-fatal outcome. And there may be, again, evidence either implicit or explicitly that the person intended to die, but for whatever reason, they did not. And of course, we also have the very common situation in which people may have suicidal ideation or thoughts of kind of being an agent of one's own death. So suicidal ideation may vary in seriousness depending on the specificity of suicide plans and the degree of the suicide intent as well. So when we talk about suicide, there may be various levels of behavior, thought, action around the term suicide that we are referring to. And so this evening, my focus is on how do we deal with someone, a loved one, a parishioner, someone in our circle even who may be contemplating suicide. In working with suicidal clients, one of the things that I've learned a lot over the years is that less is more. Even for me as a professional, one of the things that happens when we encounter someone who is suicidal is that we may have a lot of different reactions and emotions to that suicidal individual, because we may feel helpless. We may experience intensely some of their distress. We may feel very fearful of a bad outcome, that if we do not do something, that person is going to follow through on their suicidal ideas. And of course, there may be a lot of stress about the outcome, the uncertainty of what will happen. And because of all of that, sometimes what you find is that we try desperately to do something to fix the situation. We want to say something that will make the person less suicidal. We want to say something that will stop them from thinking about it. And I think in that process, however good our intentions may be, sometimes the things that persons say to a suicidal person may come across inadvertently as being quite hurtful and not helpful to where they are at the moment in time. So I think it's very important for us to acknowledge that and to just put that out there as well, that we may have good intentions sometimes, but some of the ways that we say things can come across as quite dismissive to someone who is experiencing a lot of pain, who has a very complex issue that they're grappling with and want to get through somehow. For many suicidal persons, the only thing that they can think about is ending the pain that they're going through. And for many of them, they believe that their loved ones, their friends, their families, their colleagues will not miss them, or maybe even better off without them. So of course, that also complicates things as well. How do we approach that? One of the things I really want to focus on this evening is about just maintaining that rapport with the person who is expressing any kind of suicidal thoughts, any kind of suicidal behavior. Offer that person an opportunity to share more information and validate their emotional pain. I think that is really key, and we can do that through listening to their story without judgment. Yeah, that will naturally help to reduce that person's anxiety around the stigma, to reduce the level of secrecy they may feel, etc. And so things that open up the conversation help a lot. Things like, tell me about it. It sounds like you're in a lot of pain right now. Can you tell me more about that? These kinds of opening sentences really help that person to be able to pour out and share what they are experiencing. And I think for the layperson who wants to support someone who is suicidal, this is probably one of the most helpful things that you may be able to do in that moment. Of course, we also always want to ensure that we can get that person to the appropriate care, and that we are actively referring that person to a professional person or service who is able to support them further. But it's also that we do have a place in moments when someone is experiencing that level of distress that we can help them. So open up the conversation, encourage that person to talk, ask them about, when they first noticed these thoughts, what do they think have led to these thoughts? Have they been close to acting out on these thoughts before? Now, sometimes I think that inadvertently people believe that if they ask more, if they ask that person to share with them about how they're feeling, to talk about their thoughts around wanting to hurt themselves, that it may encourage them to do so. At the moment, we have no evidence to suggest that that is so. And for many persons who are suicidal, as I said before, the act of sharing can actually reduce some of the anxiety that they may be feeling in that moment. So we want to encourage that kind of empathy for someone who is experiencing a suicidal ideation or who wants to act on it. We want to listen very much to what they're going through in that moment. What are their current stressors? What events are impacting on them? How is that impacting on their level of sleep, eating, etc.? These are the things I think that would really help initially to establish that rapport and help that person to open up. So I hope we can talk more about that as we go through the evening. I'll pass you back to Mr. Brown, and we'll talk later maybe about some do's and don'ts and things that we can say and not say even when it comes to, interacting with someone who may be suicidal.
Because it's important, as you said, that you don't want to say something which exacerbates how the person feels.
Yes.
And I would want you also, as you come back, because you're in a position at the community college, in terms of dealing with students at this time who may be facing some of these challenges. So thank you.
Yes.
Well, our next presenter will be Jolene King. I will especially thank Ms. King because I'll have to check to see if she's actually asleep, because I'm assuming that she's actually in the UK. I didn't clarify this, but she's based in the UK. So I'll just give a short summary on Jolene King. Jolene is passionate about people management and employee health and well-being. Jolene has over 15 years business management and HR experience gained in the UK, US, and Barbados. Jolene has worked across several industries and sectors and has gained valuable experience and insight into the importance of employee health and well-being and effective management of employee absence. Throughout her career, and especially since 2011, she recognized that there is a need for more support to HR professionals, managers, and employees on how to address employee health, physical and mental, and well-being at work. Jolene is acutely aware of the continued need for such support and advice, and will work with individuals and organizations that deliver tailored services to meet their specific needs. Jolene is a trained and experienced HR professional and a trained occupational psychologist. She holds an MA degree in Human Resources Management, an MSc degree in Industrial Organizational Psychology, and a BSc degree in Sociology with Psychology. Jolene is a mental health first aider, received How to Stop Smoking practitioner training, and is trained in the awareness of mental health problems and personal exercise, health, and nutrition. She is an active community member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, Northamptonshire branch, and an associate member of the Society for Industrial and Organizational Psychology. Welcome, Jolene.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am in the UK. I did get some sleep beforehand. I am operating on 4 hours ahead, so it is morning for me and not night. So suicide as a topic, as was said before, is a very difficult thing to talk about, especially if you've been personally affected by it. So I'm going to first start with my why. Why do I talk about suicide as part of what I discuss within mental health? I lost a cousin to suicide in 1995. And since then, I've lost other longtime acquaintances to suicide, and they've all been men. Suicide is the leading cause of death for men under the age of 45. It is the fourth leading cause of death for 15 to 19-year-olds globally. Men are 3 times more likely to take their lives more than women. Why do I say these things? Because these are things we need to be aware of as far as risk factors. I don't say causes, because as far as I'm concerned, there's no cause to suicide. There are risk factors that make someone more likely to commit the act. We've already had a definition of what suicide is. I tell people suicide is the end result of a combination of factors. I do not believe, and there are others who don't believe, that somebody wakes up one day and decides, I am ending my life today. This has been a process that this person has gone through, periods of depression, and it is a downward spiral with negative and distorted thinking, because it is very complex, and I would not expect any layman to understand it. But what I would like to impress upon people that, and I also firmly believe this, and others within the mental health space do as well, suicide is preventable. There are at least 5 missed opportunities before someone takes their life. So someone somewhere interacted with this person and could have intervened before that person made the decision to take their life by whatever means it was. They had the means, the motive, and the opportunity. As skewed as we may think those were, that was a decision that that person made. And the survivors, well, not the survivors, the people left behind to grieve always wonder why. And it's even worse when the person doesn't leave a note or anything else. And we'll have to pick up the pieces. So I firmly believe in early intervention, the importance of self-care, having open conversations, non-judgmental conversations with people. And that also means checking with the people around you and find out how they're doing and be genuine about it, not this superficial nonsense that we do. Hey, how you doing? And before they even answer, you down the road already. We can't have that. That is not good enough. And there is this stigma around suicide, not just suicide, but mental health in general. And let's talk about us Black people, how we perceive these things. We always, this is generational attitudes that are damaging to us. We always tell people, don't tell nobody your business. So woe betides us. How are we going to talk to counselors and therapists and people who can actually help us deal with our trauma if it's been ingrained in us not to talk to people and tell them your business? So the therapeutic process is not going to be effective if you don't open up and be a part and fully participate in the process. And then, of course, there is the culture of shame, and also there's an issue of confidentiality. Now, if you open up to a family member or a friend, will they keep that a secret, or will they just run around and tell all Tom, Dick, Harry, Mary, and Sue your business? Now, as far as in a professional space, if an individual goes to a mental health professional or anything of the sort, there is a code of conduct that we all have to abide by. If we so much as lean against any of that, we will lose our credibility and our careers, things that we've worked long and hard to build. So it's just not worth the risk. So commit to that process. And I also want to say, we talked a bit about suicide ideation. 1 in 8 people will have suicidal thoughts at some point in their life, but that does not mean they will carry out the act. So if at any point somebody's having suicidal thoughts, there's nothing particularly wrong with that, but it is something to address through the early intervention that I talked about. 77% of global suicides occur in low and medium income countries, and we're not reporting. So that's what's been reported by the World Health Organization. 1 person dies by suicide every 40 seconds. Every 40 seconds. So while we've been talking, several people across the world have taken their lives. More than 700,000 people a year die by their own hand. I want these numbers to sink in so people understand how serious this is. And less than 40 countries have a national suicide prevention strategy. That is abysmal. And even less have a national mental health strategy. So within the context of where we are and what we're talking about, what we can do as individuals to support each other, we'll talk more about that. But for me, it's about early intervention, taking care of yourself, taking care of others, being compassionate, being kind, and just being a decent human being. So that's all for me for now.
Thank you, Jolene. In terms of those numbers, because as I said, I came upon this topic because when we did a conversation earlier this year, it was said that we in Barbados, we are not aware of the level of suicide and attempted suicide. And in our parish, in terms of Holy Trinity, over the past 2-3 years in this district, we would have been faced with a number of suicides, and there were young people. And I will not describe or seek to categorize anything, but our next speaker, Kathleen Rochford, is one of our parishioners. And notwithstanding that she would have dealt with family members who would have had mental health challenges, but she is in a pivotal position of having been a next door neighbor of someone who committed suicide August this year. So Kathleen, we look forward to you sharing with us. Kathleen Rochford. Can you?
Yeah, my name is, yes. And I was unfortunate to have someone of the next door neighbors that committed suicide. And she was only 39 and she's, okay. She was only 39 and she's had a young child, about 3 years old. And her father knew she had mental issues, but he did not follow up on it. And he thought he could manage that. And unfortunately, one morning, Saturday morning, he found her hanging outside about 4 o'clock in the morning. And my neighbor called me about 5:45 and said, "What's happening? There's loads of police vans out there. What's going on? Did somebody die or something?" I said, "Well, I don't know." And soon after that, the news came over the radio that this young lady had committed suicide and she's got a young child. We were interviewed by the police, and what I've learned is the father knew she had mental issues, but never went to help her in any way by taking her to get attention. So that was the cause of it, is because I suppose a stitching time saves 9, but unfortunately she was there hanging, and I did not go to see her hanging because I thought I would not be able to take that. But lots of the neighbors didn't go either because that was terrible, terrible. But I have a family that had mental problems, and I had to do helping by taking them to get help at the mental hospital, which one was, she was only 36, and I realized, and her father did as well, that she was acting strangely. And I said to him, "Well, it's best you go down to the mental hospital to let her get some help." And she went the first time, and she did not. She was taking her medication, but then suddenly she stopped. And then the same thing happened, and I had to take her there again because I can see anything could have been possible. So I recommend that if anyone have family or friends that acting strange or not right, to try to see if they can get help. Thank you.
Good. Right. Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Our next presenter is Diane Sobers. Deanne Sobers. She's a social worker and a grief counselor who provides compassionate care to the bereaved and to persons and their families living with life-threatening or uncommunicable disease through community palliative care. She obtained her BA in sociology in 1981 and a graduate diploma in community politics and law, 1985 from Concordia University, Montreal, Quebec, Canada, with an emphasis on organizing the community organizer, which seeks to eliminate duplication in social services, yet ensuring that clients receive the assistance they need. Ms. Sobers is president of the Barbados Association of Palliative Care, a member of the International Association for Hospice and Palliative Care, a member of the Worldwide Hospice Palliative Care Alliance, and a member of the Barbados Association of Cancer Advocacy. She was the Assistant Director of the National Assistance Board from December 1987 to September 2010, and in 2011 was one of the founding members of the Barbados Association of Palliative Care. She was awarded the Barbados Service Star on 30th of November 2016 when Barbados celebrated its 50th anniversary of independence. Ms. Sobers believes that it's a human right for everyone to receive quality care palliation, and that as humanly possible, no one should die alone. Therefore, her goal and that of her colleagues will be to continue to provide the pertinent education to everyone on the island and abroad. Welcome again, Diane. We look forward to your presentation. Diane?
Hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Michael and the members of the Holy Trinity Committee for inviting me to sit with my colleagues this evening. I've been listening to Mrs. Plummer and Mrs. King and Mrs. Rochford, and I just want to highlight three things this evening: loss of health, loss of wealth, and loss of one's comfort zone is what causes people to have suicidal thoughts. I want to give you three examples. One, a 38-year-old young woman, very good job, never married. We lived with her mother, fell in love with a man, and then at the end of when she was looking for marriage, my gentleman took off. I went to overseas, I wouldn't say where, and married another. My friend is still in a psychiatric hospital after all those years. That's one. Gentleman, age 45. His wife told him he's going to leave him. And at 3 o'clock one morning, I got a knock on my door. And he said, it was knocking, and I don't answer at that time in the morning. He said, Deanna, open the door. Please open the door. And I said, who is it? He gave me his name, and I said, but why would you want to come at my home, you're a married man, at 3 o'clock in the morning? And he said, please open the door, and he came in. And he told me that his wife was going to leave him. And he's in a position that he could get a pistol and shoot her and then shoot himself. And he stayed in my home from 3 o'clock that morning until he stayed here and had breakfast. Murder, suicide. And then the other gentleman, an elderly gentleman, was ill, terminally ill, young wife with children. And he says to me, I'm lying here in all of this pain, and I want to die. I have to die. I cannot see all of this. And then on the other hand, he says to me, I wonder what will happen to my wife when I die. Younger lady. And one of the things that I've heard my colleagues say, that the depression, it's not when we are that we feel in that depression, is when we're coming out of the depression that we tend to commit suicide. They're saying, there's nothing else for me to do. I don't want to live anymore. And the other thing, as I said before, challenges within our lives. I cannot live in this environment anymore. My equilibrium is disturbed. And so as we continue this evening, I'm sure we would have experiences, and these are things that we need to watch for. Are you comfortable in your living situation? At the moment we have COVID, and we have men who are not accustomed to being so close. And the anger that is within our homes, I need to get out. I want to get out. This curfew thing is holding me back. We have a lot of that. The abuse. And then eventually, if I hit you too hard and you die, then I will want to die. And these are things that we need to look for within our present society in this island. And I've heard Mrs. Plumises and Mrs. King, we need to watch and listen. Don't mind the gossip. If you're hearing anything, look out for that. Watch and listen. And that's what I will begin with at the moment.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Diane. We are now open to questions and comments. But as said, you can raise your hand or you can place your question or comment in the chat, and we will pick up on that. Yes, Jolene.
I actually want to say something that I forgot to say before. Up until the 1960s, so the act of suicide was still deemed a criminal act. Now, why, I don't know, because if someone has died, how are you going to charge them? But that was part of the stigma. That's why they talk about committing suicide, because that was considered a criminal offense. So I don't like to use the word commit. I say suicide, the person died by their own hand, or the person took their life. Because it's really important about the language that we use and the messages that are conveyed when we speak about people who are holding on by a thread. Because by the time it's the thought before the act, because once they've decided, they've decided. And Dr. Plummer, you will know this from working with patients just before, they're usually euphoric because it's almost like a relief that they have made this decision and everything is going to be okay in wherever they intend to go next, the great yonder beyond, or wherever they believe they're going. So their family will always say, but they seemed fine. Yeah, because they decided. But if you checked with them the week before that, it was a completely different story. And something to look out for, if people start talking about look after my family members when I'm gone, they start talking about death, they start giving away all their worldly possessions. Bottom line, pay attention, because there are signs that somebody is going to take their life or their mental health is declining. Yes, people are very good at hiding. They may not say it, but they will show it in their actions. Pay attention.
Okay, Jolene, I wanted to ask you, because you said there are 5 opportunities missed. Can you articulate those?
Well, it's different for different people.
Yes.
But okay, so I always talk about the workplace context because that is where the realm in which I operate. So we're talking about withdrawal, social withdrawal. People get unusually quiet. Yeah, they're quiet people, but if they're quieter than they used to be, pay attention, something going on probably. If there is a decline in personal hygiene or them actually taking care of themselves, if somebody can't get out of bed for 2 days straight, if they're not eating, if there is a decline in their basic functioning, these are things you need to be aware of. The talk about death and dying, that's another major one. Within the context of the workplace, declining work performance, reliance on substances. So we're talking about substance misuse and substance abuse. Yes, we have a culture where people drink. But if that person is drinking more, pay attention, okay? Because addiction is very much tied to poor and declining mental health. There are a few others, but it is very much an individual thing. But the social withdrawal is very much a big one, and just the failure to take care of yourself, and also talking about death and dying. People start to shut off from the world. Dr. Plummer, you can give me some more missed opportunities on that one.
I just want to add, though, that, you know, these are kind of the typical signs we may expect to see when someone feels down. They may be suicidal, but I also have seen over the 20-something years I'm practicing, sometimes people may not present with typical signs. So I wanted to alert, you know, those who are here to that. It could be very subtle. That person can actually look happy, and not just in the week before they've decided. They can seem quite happy at work and in other settings. And sometimes what they will share with me is when they get home and they kind of strip themselves of the work and clothes and makeup and everything, they're incredibly depressed for the whole night. And they get up again in the morning to do this again. So you may see that sometimes people are not necessarily presenting looking down and out. They may actually function to some extent in their day-to-day lives. So I want to point that out. And also the more subtle signs, like people may be very reckless with themselves. You may have young men, for example, driving quite recklessly on the road because there is a death wish, but they don't want to die by their own hands per se, but they would be happy if they had a fatal accident. I've also seen like patients who are maybe chronically ill, who will share with me that they will stop taking the medication. They will not follow through on doctor's orders because they have already given up and they want to die. So just saying that sometimes I think it's important that we talk to each other. I think that's what I get from it, and I want to share with you. It's important to talk to people around you. And like Joel was saying, not just in passing, like, oh, how are you? And you're like gone, but, you know, to sit down and talk to people, see what they're thinking, how they're feeling, etc., which will give us, I think, the more kind of robust idea of what may be going on for them in their internal world.
That's something here in terms of, I heard Dr. Plummer spoke about the young men. Men do not do loss well. A man feels comfortable. I met this girl, she makes my heart feel good. And then she wakes up one morning and tells me she's leaving. I'm either going to harm her or I'll harm myself. And I think that if we can, I know that men has been talking about it, and you know, they play macho. I believe that if men can get to the men and say, listen, you're going to get hurt. The woman may leave you, but there's no need for you to drink all the whiskey. There's no need for you to harm yourself. But the thing is, what happens is that they feel embarrassed that they have to share that Francina hurt me or Jolie hurt me. I'm a big man. So I'm going to go home, put a rope around my neck, and that's it. Another thing is loss of your being the man in the house. I'm no longer making that salary. My wife is now making this amount of money. I've lost my job at the bank already. I've lost my status. That's a very serious thing. I'm not sitting no home with the commissioner of police, and I'm home now doing nothing. And I've seen instances, I've heard of one instance, but the others, I'm just going to mention one where a gentleman would go to the office every day, within that office with the ambassador, and eventually the depression hit him, and he was moving more and more into depression. As I said before, it's the coming out when they harm themselves. That's something that we need to watch for, that depression.
Yeah, thank you so much.
What are some of the myths that we should disabuse ourselves of?
There are quite a few. You know, I actually interviewed a few of my clients, especially those who have presented with suicidal ideation in recent times. I was doing a presentation on suicide, and I wanted to kind of get a more recent idea of what they are experiencing in terms of what people believe. And one of them said to me, you know, people say to them all the time, like they were not depressed in the past. So why are they depressed now? You know, it must be that they just kind of weaker and they can't cope with things. So that's a prominent one. I think a few of the clients I spoke to experience. There are a lot of other common myths, like people are just wanting to get attention and they are not really serious. If they were serious, they would just do it and not talk about it, or that they just want to manipulate people and therefore we shouldn't take them seriously. There are also myths like, you know, suicide is a selfish act on the act of the person who is contemplating that. And of course, I think that is a lot more complex than, you know, as simple as being something selfish on their part. There's a lot of ideas about if you just pray about it, you'll be fine. Like just take it to God and, you know, you'll be okay. And of course, that is, I think, also one of these things that's meant to be soothing and encouraging, but can be quite difficult for someone who is suicidal to hear, because it might induce a lot of guilt for them as well. Okay. And the other attendant things would be like, well, just go out and exercise and do this and do that and go out more and you will feel less depressed. But of course, we know, like Joel said, and we know a lot of, maybe one in, many cases of persons who are suicidal, they also have underlying depression. They may all have depression and anxiety. They may have a personality disorder. So there's a lot that may be going on there for that person that needs to be addressed, often with some kind of professional support. So I think, again, like I said in the opening, you know, sometimes we intend to be supportive and we want to do something that might help that person through, but it comes across to them as being very dismissive, minimizing what they're experiencing, and not taking in the full depth of the experience, which I have to say often spans over many, many years. By the time we get to that point with someone who is suicidal, they probably have been contemplating this for some time. They've probably have many risk factors over many years that have brought them to that point as well.
Glad to hear that one of the things that we've noticed is that Christians are not supposed to have those thoughts. So they're already guilty. They're guilty. They're thinking, but I can't do this. How are they going to say that I'm not a Christian? That's one.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that people are afraid for psychologists and psychiatrists. I don't want them. They would think I'm mad.
Yeah.
Have to get that stigma is the problem. People do not want to seek those kind of help. When they talk to the doctor, a certain level, cut it off at a certain point. And they're afraid of the medication. That's another thing that a lot of people don't want to take the medication, as was mentioned before. You have to look out for a lot of these things, and the fear it causes a lot of people to become depressed. I am no longer who I am. I'm afraid to live alone. I'm afraid if my wife leaves me. I'm afraid if my husband leaves me or my children. Fear of the separation, pain of the separation, whether it's money, wealth, whatever it is, that separation causes a lot of pain. And they need help during that time.
So
Okay,
another myth that we need to discuss is this business of all men being strong and they shouldn't cry and they shouldn't show emotions, when the stats already show that men are 3 times more likely to take their lives. And that's in part because they don't have an outlet to show their emotions in a healthy way. So by the time they do, it is destructive. And the panelists have already talked about the types of things that men do, very violent and reckless. And why is that? Because we are not teaching. And this is from the time, almost the time they come out of the womb. We're not teaching our boys, our young men, our men, how to handle their emotions in healthy ways and the coping mechanisms in order to address life's stressors. Because life ain't easy. There are a lot of stressors in life. And if we learn to deal with them in a productive way, it can limit the instances of declining mental health and the instances of suicide.
Thank you.
I really like the point that you make emphasizing men, because we know more men die by suicide. I think interestingly for me, of course, we know a lot more women attempt suicide. Men tend to use more lethal methods, which is part of why they die more often by suicide. But the interesting thing for me is that we talk about men finding it hard to talk, but I notice too sometimes for women, they talk a lot about things, but perhaps not the things at the core that make them feel vulnerable, that really impact on how they feel, their traumas, their hurts. That may not be things that they go to. You know, when women meet, they may talk about their children, their spouses, they'll go on about things that feel more comfortable like that, but perhaps not the deeper issues that may contribute towards suicide. And so I want to say that let's not just think we have to pay attention to men, absolutely, but also we want to encourage women to have deeper conversations around the things that really impact on them as well.
And what is really toxic and is not doing us any favors is the superhero syndrome.
Yeah.
Being strong, this whole business about Black people being strong is to our detriment. And it is killing us. It is killing us literally and figuratively. There is no shame in being weak or showing weakness. We are human beings. We are fallible.
Mm-hmm.
And even within the context of religion and church, yes, we pray, but you know who also puts the therapists and everything else on this earth to assist us? The same God that we are praying to. So I've heard within church context that people believe that psychiatrists and psychologists are demonic and part of the devil. But then why did God give them these skills to help us? So and another thing I want to circle back and tie in with religion and suicide, there are some denominations, I don't know if this is still the case, but it has been historically, who refuse to bury people who have died by their own hand. And families have resorted to lying about the cause of death in order to give them what they deem a Christian burial. Now, if this is how we are rejecting people within the society, of course, there's going to be shame and guilt if you have to lie about how someone died. So even in death, people don't have, and burial, people don't have any dignity. We really have to look at our perceptions about mental health and suicide and how we treat each other in life and death.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Could I just say something? Mic is off.
Sorry, I'm speaking. Sorry, question is for Deanne. Would Deanne explain the difference between making an advance medical directive and suicide?
Medical directive is what we would call a living will says, I do not want to be hooked up to a machine. I don't want to have fetal treatment, extra treatment. If you realize that there's nothing more that you can do for me, leave me alone. Let me die. I'm not talking about euthanasia, we're not discussing that. But you have a document where it says, at the end of life, I want this. Again, don't want to be hooked up to the machines, don't want to have extra treatment, don't want to be placed in maybe ICU after a certain amount of time, let me come out. The problem is that here in the Caribbean is that we do not have the law that allows us to have advanced directives. It's done in the States, it's done in North America, done in Europe. It's not done in some of the Caribbean islands. I don't know if it's in Trinidad, Guyana, or Jamaica, but I know it's not done here in Barbados. But the point is that I am saying I've been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and I'm just lying there wasting away. Just leave me alone. Allow natural death. They don't use the word do not resuscitate anymore. Allow natural death. Do not put an IV on me. Do not give oxygen. But the problem here in the Caribbean is that doctors are saying we are here to preserve life. So we are going to keep you. God is the one who takes the breath away from us anyway, but we are going to keep you in quality of care until you die. We cannot take that from you. But if you say in a document, this is what I want, do not put me on a machine, let me die. That's fine. But another problem is that we cannot give medication to help you to die. That's assisted suicide. That's not in advanced directives. Advanced directive says, leave me, let me die naturally. That's the difference. But the thing is that I know that the hospital has been working on that document, whereby when you come into the hospital, you will sign the consent. But at the stage now, with COVID, I guess everything is stalled at the moment. But that's what an advanced directives is all about. What we call a living will. This is what I want then. It's not the will that you leave Michael all your property. That's two different things that we're speaking about.
In terms of feeling guilty, because we spoke of we would have missed opportunities to prevent. Can we share, could the panel share in terms of some of the issues that families face after the event?
There are a lot of what ifs. What could I have done to prevent this? And with any kind of bereavement, you always play back in your mind the last conversation you had and the conversation before it, what was said, and it is over analyzing what was said, what you could have said to change what they thought or what they would have done. And this can go on for years, because I always think back to my cousin when he took his life in 95. Even now, sometimes I think about, I remember distinctly where I was, what I was wearing when I last saw him. And this is 1995. And I always think about, but our last interaction was a happy one. So I never feel the guilt and the regret, because there is the guilt and regret, because the survivors, the people left behind, always think, what could I have done to prevent this? But part of what you need to accept, and if this is true, the person made their decision. And truthfully, unless you were right there to stop them at that very moment, there really isn't much you could have done in that moment to stop them from doing what they were doing. And it's hard to accept that. And it takes years to accept that. And some people will never accept that, because it's not the type of death where you saw the person gradually decline and you were able to watch them pass on and transition. It is seemingly sudden, but not, because this has been a gradual downward spiral that the person has been going through internally. So it is hard. It's just hard. And I think back to a long time acquaintance that I knew from teenage years who took his life last year. And he was a very popular person in Barbados. And I know everybody in his midst is still wondering why and what they could have done to prevent it, or possibly what could they have said. And there was somebody who commented that they had met the day before and everything seemed fine. So even though we are over a year later, the thoughts are still there. What could I have done differently? And people still ask the question why. But there will never be an answer because that person is not going to come back and tell you why. And sometimes you just got to accept that that person was in a very dark space. They saw no way out. They felt that their family and friends would be better off within them. The depression distorted their thinking. And it's just unfortunate all around for that person and the people who are left behind.
Absolutely. You know, oftentimes when one person dies by suicide, dozens of people are impacted by that death for a long time. And so sometimes people who are contemplating suicide believe that everybody is going to be much better when they're gone. And it is one of the myths I found, like the people who are left behind experience this, like Joelle is saying, for a long time. And it's a tough thing to follow. I think the sense of failure that many people feel, what did I do wrong? Could I have done things differently, like she said? And one thing that comes up a lot is, did they not understand that we love them, or did they not love us enough to want to live for us? These are the kinds of things that you may find people grapple with as they try to fill the blanks over many years.
Well, one of the things that we're taking for granted is touch. We are social beings. And with this COVID thing, there is nobody who you can hug. Now you will see people in the shopping mall, and you would run and put your arms around them, and you would see the weight up in their bodies that something is happening with them. That's not available to a lot of people who need that. I wanted somebody to hold me so that they can get to this point. And that attachment is no longer there. It has to be some way or something that we could be able to catch a lot of that. I want you to hold me. My friends, I see you in the mall, being abused by my husband. But I am feeling the pain. I just want you to hold me so I can get to this point. And that's something that I'm really worried about. The children, children love to be held and hold their teacher and run after their teachers. All of that withdrawal within the home. What impact is that going to make on our children later if they don't get back into the environment of social being social again? And that's something that is really, we need to keep an eye on. That touch is missing.
Okay, Diane, you spoke to the question of where Barbados is with regard to making the advanced medical directive. You did not actually say how long it has been in abeyance, but are we in Barbados or the Caribbean, are we moving towards the European popular activity in terms of assisted suicide? Do you think we are anywhere near having these things done in the Caribbean and in Barbados?
In my opinion, based on what I'm hearing, I don't think that we would move towards the assisted suicide. And I'll tell you that for spiritual reasons, that's going to be one of the points within the Caribbean, that after I have done that to you, I have to answer to the Lord, because I've taken a life, I've committed murder. That's our environment, our thinking, our psyche says, there's no way that I would take off my good head to make him comfortable. I'll give you another example. We have patients in the home who are dying, and you will hear the family says, how long, how much more is she going to just lie there? And they're not saying to you, give her something to make her sleep. They're saying to you, give her something to ease the pain. Yes, we do the pain management, but we are not going to take that life. That person sleeps whenever God is ready for that person. But again, as I said, the spiritual aspect within that, within our society here, I mean, I don't know how that will come through. I mean, very difficult.
When Kathleen spoke earlier, she said the lady had a young child. How do we speak to children in terms of suicide and death?
Honesty.
Yeah. Okay,
Right, Jolene.
excellent. I think we're on the same
Right,
page.
Jolene.
Yeah.
It's
honesty.
incredibly difficult conversation, but
Mm.
age appropriate, honest, upfront discussion is the only way I think to go with that. You have to be sensitive to how the child can receive what you need to tell them, what words you will use, how you will say it. And of course, be very sensitive to how things are phrased to a child, but to be honest about what has happened and to help that child begin to process this very painful death that they will have to live with for their lives. Jolene, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, yeah, you said exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say open, honest, transparent, age appropriate, and support them through their grief.
Mhm.
And because they have to go to school and interact with children whose parents would have told them something that is not helpful, and children can be cruel. Oh, so you know the little things, and in a small society like Barbados, word spreads. So you would have already heard how the person died, who found them, when they found them, and that would be circling all over the school within a 24-hour period. That child has to go to school and deal with that every day and internalize it. So there's no shame in getting that child in counseling as well, because they have lost a parent. And that is important, because another risk factor, if there's a history of suicide in the family, that is a risk factor for that individual. So get the child the help, the professional help they need, and be very supportive, but be honest about what happened. Because I know of situations where children have been lied to about how their parent died. They fell down the stairs or something. And then years later, child doing the investigation, because this is the world of the internet, they find out that that their parent died by suicide. So not only were they lied to for a significant portion of their life, they now know that there's the potential, whatever the probability may be, that they may have history of mental illness within their family or be at risk of suicide themselves. So be honest with everybody. That's the best approach.
One of the questions that the child always asks me, if mommy or daddy had loved me, why did he or she take her head? It's like, that's one of the things, the question is that, especially in age between 5 and 8, that's just as a parent leaves a divorce within the family. Mommy and daddy, why did daddy leave me, not love me? So you have to answer that question of love. That's the first thing that they come on the mind. You have taken love from me. And in terms of when the child then goes to school, you don't have any mommy or daddy anymore. And the children within their peers have to deal with that. This is why we all can be honest with each other. Sit down and say, well, this happened and that happened. And it has nothing to do with you. It's not your fault. Remember, it's not your fault. These things happen. We have to stress.
It's very common for the younger age children, like primary, lower level, the age group, to think that they have done something, or an act that they did at home or something they didn't do might have contributed to this. And it's really, really important for parents and caregivers to pay attentive to these things and to clarify for them that not doing a chore or the dishes or putting away something or forgetting something is not the reason that their parent or loved one died by suicide. So really important, I think, to clarify these things that children may harbor. And sometimes they may be very quiet, very internalizing with these thoughts. So it's important, again, I always emphasize the place of talking, even though the child may not necessarily initiate that discussion, but as a caregiver, how can you be age appropriate again, but give them an opportunity to know that you are there and you are willing to talk about this with them? I think that's a really important gift that we ought to offer to all our children.
Okay. I'm going to take editorial privilege. We are speaking about suicide and families and reaction. And I don't know why this came into my head. How do people who, I'm driving, I cause an accident and someone died. Do you, in terms of counseling, do you have to deal or in the past dealt with those persons, like the driver who has survived and persons have died?
Yeah. I've dealt with many, like in my student population, we have often they have accidents, the students among themselves. We've had a case where two students died. The driver survived the accident. So we have in that population alone, I've seen adults, somebody coming from, in one case, a carnival party, had drank and was really tired. She had an accident in which someone died. I saw her as well. I mean, I think some of the emotions, the complicated grief, the bereavement, the shame, all of that is also very much present for persons who are in that moment as well, who are dealing with these complicated losses, of friends, loved ones that may have died by their own hands. And of course, are left to deal with the families, the friends, the colleges, the community that wants to protect them and support them and be there, but also understands that people have died through their actions or inactions. So again, really a very complicated thing, and a lot of talking and support is needed. As a society, we can be quite judgmental around these things. And of course, it takes someone who is already vulnerable through that experience alone and makes them more at risk, because they now may feel the brunt of judgment, of shame and guilt that even others, put at them as well through that experience.
I might add to Dr. Plummer's point. There was a gentleman who was on his way home from work one evening, and at the junction, he came across and this lady died. And he said he wanted to go to her husband and says, "I am sorry." And his attorney said, "Don't go anywhere because you are showing guilt." And that was the only thing on his mind. I wanted to go to her husband and say, "I'm sorry." And that gentleman is still, I believe he's still carrying some of that, because the other half says, "I don't want to see him. Don't want to see him." So that guilt is heavy on his mind, that I know that something happened. Something happened, and not that I'm saying that I was driving, I caused the death. But there were circumstances. I wasn't drinking, I was coming home from work, and because of the junction, the accident, and the husband told him, "I don't want to see you." And all he wanted to say, "I'm sorry." And that's something that is really, really traumatic. The other half, when I'm not speaking about the drunk driver, but someone who's just going home from work caused an accident. Very, very long, the pain is long.
Okay, I have not seen any other questions in the chat or any hands raised. So I will ask our panel to make some closing remarks as we bring this conversations to a close. And I will do the reverse order. So Deanna, I will start with you. Then we'll have Kathleen, then Jolene, and then Ms. Plummer.
Thank you, Michael. One of the things that I believe that anything that you're attached to and that thing is taken away from you, thing or person, you're going to grieve. You're going to hurt. You're either going to be happy or sad. I found the lump in my breast. Veteran had the boy, you know what I mean? They took the lump out and it's benign. Next breast, they found the lump. I have cancer. And I have to deal with that both of my breasts are going to come off. How is my husband going to look at me? And I need somebody to talk to tell them that I am still a human being. I'm still a woman. So ladies and gentlemen, when you are going through any loss, any separation, always find somebody that will listen to you. Listen to you. Don't withdraw. Don't want you to withdraw. Find somebody who will listen to you. And I appreciate it, the time we spent together this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Kathleen, any closing remarks? Kathy? Okay, we can come. So, Jolene, your closing remarks?
Yes, I want to stress the importance of self-care as a means of early intervention. Self-care is just about having positive and healthy habits. It's taking care of yourself in the present for the future. So this can take many forms, and it is all about what you enjoy doing. I tell people in my presentations and webinars, self-care is what feeds your soul. Life can be challenging. That is part of life. Understand what your stressors are, know what your limits are, establish and maintain your boundaries, learn to say no, take care of yourself internally and externally, build a support system, because that is really important with building your resilience against life's challenges. And, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, show some compassion, and show yourself some grace. Because we are dealing with a lot. We are going through a pandemic with no end in sight. Everybody has been touched by this. Their mental health has been affected. It could happen to anyone. So be kind to yourself. And as I said, show yourself some grace. You are doing the best you can.
Thank you. Ms. Plummer?
Thank you very much. I want to reiterate that message. Very important, I think, about looking after our mental health. And of course, I think the pandemic, it has highlighted the place that mental health has in our lives and how critical it is to our functioning, especially in times of stress. So again, I want to emphasize that self-care, that looking after our mental health is important. And of course, to extend that as well, we need to look out for each other. Look out for those who may not be coping. And of course, you need to do that through having caring and non-judgmental conversations with people. Take time to understand where people are at, people in your circle, and listen with compassion. listen with humility, listen with our humanity, listen with empathy at the struggles people may have. You know, encourage people to open up and to share their experience without interruption and without judgment, because that act alone of listening to them fully, attentively, almost prayerfully, really can help someone to just be heard. And that is an incredibly powerful gift that we can offer someone who is feeling distressed. And of course, encouraging connectedness as a church, that's a powerful place you have. And, you know, helping people to share experience, to have these kinds of conversations are important, I think, in that as well. Referring people to services, you know, we talked earlier about some of the challenges that maybe being part of a church community can pose towards getting access to mental health treatment. But we want to encourage you here, if you're listening, there is no shame in that. And it doesn't mean you're not godly or somehow you're weak or anything. It just means that you may be experiencing some distress and you may need some support to help you through something that could be quite treatable. So I really want to encourage people to refer persons, to talk openly, to encourage understanding around this. You know, like Jolene said, any one of us can be susceptible to this. I'm not immune. I mean, I'm a mental health professional dealing with all the issues of the pandemic and supporting people all over in dealing with their stresses. And of course, that is a huge challenge as well for us in mental health. You know, so we all want to be aware of that. We want to look after ourselves, implement activities again that promote mental health, that encourage us to look after our physical and our mental health. Thank you.
Thank you. Go back to Kathleen for your closing comments. Kathleen. Okay, we know. Oh, right. Thank you, Kathleen. Any closing comments? You need to unmute.
Yeah, what I wanted to ask is when a man is married and then his wife, you know, went around with some other man, and then she comes in and he kills her first and then kills himself.
Sorry, you were muted for part of that, so we didn't hear.
Oh, okay. I said when a man is married and his wife has gone out and maybe going out with another man, and then she comes in and he kills her and then he kills himself.
So it's murder, suicide, a double tragedy. Everybody else left to pick up the pieces. They possibly had children. The children are now orphans. It's just a tragedy all around. So is the question, what do we do next?
Yes.
Boy.
Because of
we first have to process it, because it is a tragedy. We have to sit back. We have to grieve, go through that process, try and the same thing we talked about, if there are children who are left, we have to take care of those children, be open and honest with them, and make sure that somebody's taking care of them physically, because someone has to take over guardianship of them. And then it is about their family members, because with those types of situations, there are usually rifts in the family. Like the husband's family maintains their position, and then the woman's family maintains their position. And if there had been any sort of domestic violence or anything in between there, and then the next thing is about, you hear talk about, she brought it on herself. If she didn't go with the man, he wouldn't have killed she, and you know the talk.
Yes.
So all sorts of variables are within that scenario. But I'll be honest, that is not something I would ever want to have to deal with professionally because it's messy. And
Yeah, very,
there's no good outcome, but
Mhm.
it's about giving support to everybody who's left behind and who has to grieve and live with the loss of their loved ones.
Yes, especially the children having to lose both mom and dad at the same time, and the way they have lost their mom and dad.
And it's splashed all over social media and the newspapers. So it's not like it's a secret.
No. Thank you.
Okay, so no other closing comments, Kathleen?
Well, I enjoyed the conversations and the experiences of what has happened and how they were dealt with. I think that is not an easy thing. I mean, some people do not realize the person that is dealing with you, the caregiver, what they're experiencing and what they have to go through and hoping for the best.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you again, Kathleen.
Right. Thanks for the information too.
Yeah. Okay, I now invite Lana Fingal, who is a member of the Conversations Committee, to do the summary, the vote of thanks, and if there's anything to be said about the 190th anniversary, I will allow you to say it at this time.
Well, thank you, Michael. Good night, everyone. I want to say thank you to our panel of ladies this evening. It was wonderful to actually have a full panel of ladies tonight. Ms. Francesca Plummer, Ms. Jolene King, Ms. Kathleen Rochford, and Ms. Deanne Sobers. Of course, not to be forgotten, we want to say thank you too to Ms. Althea Hardin for her opening prayers to start the evening for us. So tonight we heard that there are many signs to look for in persons who are contemplating suicide. And we also learned that there are some people who can appear very happy, but could also be depressed and suicidal. But one of the things that stood out for me is the feedback on listening and having genuine conversations with people, because I think that particularly in the world today where we're all so busy, that we're perhaps all guilty of perhaps asking someone, well, how are you? And not even really taking the time to listen to what they have, how they have responded to you. And sometimes it may be a simple conversation. It could be with a stranger at just waiting in line somewhere, and that person just strikes up a conversation because they may feel that, you know, they may want an opportunity to have an interaction with somebody, for someone to have just a simple listening ear. So that stood out for me. And that's one of the things that I think that we all need to work on and to focus on a bit more, particularly, as I said, in these difficult times. And especially now with COVID, you know, as the conversation was going on and we began to talk about people having their experiences during these times, I reflected on someone I know who struggled with the working from home. So, you know, we started working from home and this person lived alone. So immediately when she moved from working in a setting with having a full room of co-workers, a full floor of co-workers every day, and having to work on her own, she really struggled. But fortunately, she was able to seek help early, and she was able to find ways to deal and to adapt, and so with her struggles. So I agree with you that self-care is really important. I firmly believe in that myself. But I too have been working from home since last year. But I recognize when I need to give myself some self-care. I recognize when I need to leave the house and see someplace different, even if I just take a drive, because my home has now become my work, has become my gym, has become a lot of things. School for my son. So there are signs there, and you know, I agree with you. Self-care is important, and also having a strong circle around you, a strong circle of friends who you can depend on, who you're able to stay in contact with, so that you have some sense of normalcy and that balance that we all need. So ladies, I thank you for a very interesting discussion this evening. I think that your roles, I would say, are very important, particularly in these times, because there's so much negativity going on in the world today, that we definitely need to find ways to support each other. So thank you to all of you. Michael?
Good. Thank you, Lana. I will now invite Reverend Bean to make a few remarks.
Well, good night, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight as you speak about another timely topic: suicide, me, you, and everyone. And as we know, suicide is very real. I remember my first encounter as a young man, where a lady, 18 years old, she set herself afire because her boyfriend left her. And when she said words like, "I'm going to kill myself," no one, as the panelists would have said, took her seriously. My next encounter would be as a ordained minister, and I'm getting ready to leave the office to go to another appointment, and a phone call comes through. I'm saying I can't take the call because I must leave. And my secretary said, "You must take this call." And I did. I said, "Good night, hello." And the person said, "I have a gun to my head, about to shoot myself. Give me one reason why I shouldn't." Of course, as I think Dr. Plummer said, you couldn't say, "Let us pray and move on," but rather help him unpack that statement and, of course, begin to administer counseling. And so the topic tonight is very real for me and for many of us tonight. And it is always amazing how the committee always find these relevant topics to present time after time. And right now we are beginning to, or we close tonight another season of conversations. And what a way to end it, where we're warning others to look out for those who are struggling and to watch out for the signs. Don't take words and these comments for granted, but look out for each other. I want to thank the panelists, as Lana has done already, for an awesome job tonight and the wonderful information, as Kathleen has stated, that you've shared and cleared up a lot of, I guess, myths and brought a lot of things to the forefront that we do need to discuss. And this again is what conversations is all about. You're thinking behind conversations was to do just that, to create an environment where relevant topics could be presented and discussed. To make the environment conducive enough to have meaningful dialogue. And so I want to thank the committee who's done a wonderful job. And as I said, we want to create an environment that's conducive for meaningful dialogue. And sometimes we need to bring in wonderful panelists like those we have here tonight, because you bring and you add more substance to the dialogue. And persons can ask these questions to you and have input as well, because sometimes we don't have access to the people we want to have access to ask these questions to. And so this forum allows for that to take place. Conversations. It's a platform, and this platform, I believe, also reminds the wider community and even the wider world that the church is not disengaged, but we are at the forefront when it comes to approaching topics, even topics that may seem taboo. As we mentioned, the church not wanting to bury people in their graveyards or even have a service, we want to talk about those topics that are sometimes considered taboo or even difficult to speak about. And this is the forum where we have those kind of dialogues. And I remember some of the dialogues we've had, Black Lives Matter, reopening of the borders, and it even helped someone get back to Barbados by sharing information on that particular show, the reopening of schools, and we've been able to talk about those difficult topics, even where we spoke about the church's role as healer, or is it perpetrator when it comes to gender-based violence? And so we must examine ourselves and have we contributed to the gender-based violence, the church and reparation, justice, and the healing process, celebrating our elderly and protecting their rights, management of health, mental health care in this COVID environment. We've talked about the elderly, we've talked about the young, and the committee has just done a marvelous job at trying to always be relevant. And I want to personally and publicly thank Annette Weeks and Lana Fingal and Michael Brown, the male of the group, for their efforts. And they've always been able to keep the show, the conversation at a professional standard and keep the discussion going. I want to thank those persons in the background, the technical team. We don't see them, but they're in the background making things happen. I want to thank our esteemed panelists, those who have participated tonight, Deanne and Jolene and Dr. Plummer. If I missed anyone, please forgive me for your contribution tonight. And all the panelists throughout the past year plus who've shared your knowledge and your wisdom and adding more flavor to this conversation. I want to thank those who have journeyed with us from last year, I believe July, and you've been a part of the various conversations and you've lent your voice or even sat back in the background, just took in the information, but you've been faithful and you have encouraged us along the way. And on behalf of the Conversations Committee, on behalf of the Church of the Holy Trinity, I want to thank you all for a job well done as we bring this season of conversations to a close. Again, it's a pleasure. I trust that this has been another fruitful experience for you. And I wish you all the very best as we now approach independence and of course the Republic and then Christmas. Please stay safe, keep well. COVID is real. Do your best in that regard. And as the show tonight encourages us to look out for other persons, especially during this time of year. God bless you. Thank you, Michael.
Reverend Bean. I now invite Jennifer Gooding to lead us in the closing prayer.
Let us pray. Almighty God, as we come to the end of our session tonight, we want to thank you for all those who took part in this discussion. We ask that your hand of protection be on our panelists and that you continue to give them the wisdom, the understanding in their daily work as they seek to share their knowledge and help others. We give thanks for what we have heard and learned tonight about this difficult topic. And we pray that we may have the courage and the discernment to put into practice some of what we have heard. Help us to bring comfort to the sorrowful and strength to those who are tempted, encouragement to those who are depressed, especially at this time. And for those who are suicidal, we ask, oh Lord, that you bless them with the strength of love to meet each day with new courage, with friendships, to bring moments of joy in their time of anguish and despair, and a hope for the future. Tonight, oh God, we pray that in our happiness and comfort, we may never forget the sorrow and pain and loneliness of others. We pray for peace of mind, which comes from casting our burdens on you. Give us that peace of your presence and the certainty that you will never leave us or forsake us, and that you will never let us go. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you, Lana. We thank you for sharing with us, and we look forward to you joining with us again in February for another in the series of conversations. As you know, in Barbados, curfew is at 9, so I hope that everybody's at home and not going to be risking having to leave where they are at this time. Be safe, and especially to you, Jolene, thank you. And Ms. Plummer, thank you, but you're not that far away, you're within our time zone. But Jolene, thank you very much. And thank you also, Kathleen and Deanne. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Very
for
welcome.
having
Good
me.
night, everybody.
Good night.
Take
Good
care,
night.
everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Good night.
See?
Sure,